Okay. Um, so we were supposed to have an ASL interpreter, and they had a little bit of a medical emergency, and the backup does not have Apple. So Beth is going to try to do this while we talk. I love
We'll,
you for this.
we'll
I
see what
really love
happens.
you for this. Yeah.
I'm sorry to the
Okay.
audience.
So let me introduce the show, and then we'll kind of get into what it's all about. This is the Laughter After Trauma show. My name is Deanna. I am your host. I am a survivor and thriver after intimate partner violence, and I have found the laughter and the beauty in healing. And this is something that led me to coaching. I'm an educator and I'm a speaker on this topic. And what I do here in this show is share my guests with you who have also found their laughter after trauma to show you that we're not alone, that we can create community and connection and all share our laughter after. This month is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so we are going to be talking on that subject specifically. It's what I have survived, and my guest here, Beth, has also survived. And so I'm going to give you a little information about Beth, but I don't have a whole lot. We're going to let her tell her story right here on the show. So Beth is a survivor. She has 4 children. I believe I have that right. Yes.
Yep.
Okay. And she is an advocate. And American Sign Language is one of her things because she really believes that we need to create a space of inclusivity where people don't have to ask for these needs to be met, but that they're just automatically there and set for people, which is why we were going to have an interpreter here today. And now she is doing it. So great job. Okay. So, Beth, I would love to hear you speak on your story. Just tell us about what you do now and maybe some of the story that led into what you do now.
Yes, so I'm sorry. I'm going to try my best to sign and talk at the same time. It's really hard because we're talking 2 separate languages. I appreciate my interpreters, but unfortunately, without the iPhone and an iPad, it just doesn't, it's not compatible. So that is a UX complaint, right? User experience that we need to improve that. So everyone could have access. But anyway, I'm so happy to be here with you tonight, and I appreciate the opportunity to share my story. So where do I begin? I was divorced in 2008, so it's been some time. I was married for 17 years. I do have 4 adult children, 30, 29, 27, and 21. I hope I had them all right. If I say them out of a different order, so but what led me to what I'm doing now is the fact that I, got my life back, and I was able to see clearer after the trauma and learn how to laugh again, and also be able to share my experiences with other people that are behind me, maybe experiencing the same thing. So for you, just ask me questions. It'll help me be able to guide my thought.
Okay, no problem. So, one of the things that I want to ask is when you were in that situation, a lot of people, when they're dealing with domestic violence, have a difficult time removing themselves from the situation. So, tell me how long you were in that situation.
So through the years, I didn't really realize that I was in a domestic violence situation until the physical part happened. But
Mm-hmm.
looking back, I think I realized and knew that, the language, that the behavior, that the finance, that the guilt or the blame, all of that is encompassing that makes domestic violence. But until we're educated about that, we're thinking it only means physically being hit, before you realize that that is domestic violence. It was never sexual. It was never anything happened against my will in the situation. But I think through the years, as I mentioned, we were married for 17 years, but I'm sure 16 of those years were warnings. There were things that were happening that I was ignoring. And maybe because I didn't want to see the truth, or maybe because I was, didn't have another way or another. I just didn't realize enough. I didn't have enough education about domestic violence and what it meant. I figured, people fight, people, have an argument, but it was never physical until it became physical.
Right. And I think that people don't really understand that the violence starts way before.
Right.
The emotional part of it can be more crippling sometimes than the physical part. The physical part, it happens, it's done, and you feel like, okay, and it's right in your face. The emotional part is not.
That's very true. Yes, it's wow. If we could only, you don't learn about this in school. You don't learn this about, having conversations with your peers. You think you're the only person until you meet people like you and myself that we share so many of the similar parallels to our stories, and we realize you're not alone. And that's why I think that it's so important to know that there are resources and people available that can help and talk about your situation that's happening right now instead of waiting until it's so far down that sometimes it even results in death. So we really want to be able to share these experiences so people don't feel isolated, they don't feel alone, and they know that people do care and are not judging. I think that was part of it. I felt like people would judge me because I already had the world against us from the beginning of our marriage. So I have a biracial marriage, and that was not really blessed by my family. It was not really supported by my family. It was, I'm a Jewish girl growing up, and there's these expectations that you marry, white, Jewish, a lawyer or a doctor, and those are the goals for your life. And when you change the plan and you're marrying someone else that was not expected to be in the picture of it all, then you feel like if you don't have that family support, who do you tell something's not right? You're going to be proud and you're going to say, I'm going to do this, and till death do us part. And that I was very serious about my vows. And I think that it was part of the manipulation also, and the control that my ex-husband had on me, because I wanted to be a good, right person and just get divorced. He wasn't cheating on me and he wasn't hitting me. So I thought that, okay, and I had our beautiful children to take care of. So you stay.
Yes. And I want to address that because when you are in that situation and you've been raised to honor those vows, and maybe even sometimes taught that it's a sin or you'll lose God's favor if you do get divorced, then it becomes this part of you that says, well, why can't I make this work? Other people have done this. They've managed to live up to their vows, and something's wrong with me. And I know we talked about that, and that's a feeling that comes up, and it's a reason why you keep trying over and over to make it work.
Right. Right. And plus I came from a family that, my parents, they didn't really argue, and they had this happy life. And my mom was a little bit, acceptable, submissive, so to speak. And not that my dad was, abusive, but he was a controller for sure. Dad controlled the situation. He said that she made the last decision, but really he did. So for me to follow my husband and being the leader, and me to follow, even though I was a very independent person before I met him, very independent. And I lost that because it was easier to just accept being the follower than being argumentative all the time, because what you're seeing is not right. But when someone is bigger, stronger, and angrier than you start to just, kind of duck down into your shell a little bit and say, white flag, I surrender. But that was like, I mean, I look back and I remember year one when there were problems where I was like, would leave and go stay, at his mother's house. But nobody ever really wanted to get involved. And it was like, you decide what you want to do. So it was really, really, really scary and really hard. But I just said, I'm going to go forward. I've made a promise, to God, to my husband, and to my children, and I'm going to follow through. But it's interesting because he always told me, through the years, if I ever tried to leave with the kids, he would try to kill me. And he was very strong and very serious when he was angry. I believe that he would actually try to do that. So you stay because you imagine in your mind, if I leave and he kills me, then my kids are going to be stuck with him raising them. No way. So it was just easier for me to just loop and accept.
So you feel, number one, you feel like you have no options. Number two, you have gotten so conditioned over time to keep peace that you start to lose who you are. You become this person that is just literally keeping peace and navigating so as not to make waves. And that's really not a way to live, but it becomes a way of life. And to leave then also becomes such a threat that you're not sure it's the safest thing to do.
Right.
So this question comes up. When you decided to leave, you did find yourself in a life-threatening situation. Yes. Tell us about it.
Okay, so it was supposed to be an amazing day, and there were situations that happened, but the last day, the last moment, he had opportunity, is I'm going to share that story. So I had just graduated from an interpreter training program. I had just taken my state certification test. It was supposed to be a happy day, but the whole time I went back to school, he was feeling very threatened that when I graduated, I was going to leave him because I was going to see the world different. Because I was not allowed to work for many years until he was tired of working. Then I had to work. But on this specific situation, I finished. We went to his sister's house. And when we went to his sister's house, he was actually fixing the wall from where my brother-in-law had threw my sister-in-law through the wall. So my ex-husband was a painter. So he could fix the evidence. Right? You would never know when something happened because he could fix it. And I too had been through a wall at one time, but he was fixing that. But anyway, we went there, and I was at that moment, I was like, I'm done. I mean, I knew in my heart that I was done. And let me go back a few days, is that my son, my oldest son, looked at me in my eyes and he said, "We're not safe here." And the expression on his face was the trauma in my brain to see his expression. I said, I will figure it out. I will figure out a way to leave. But my kids also always had a bag packed in their closet, always had it ready to go. And we had to use those bags a few times. We would leave and go, and he would be sorry, we would come back. But anyway, on that day, he had lost something very special to himself. And he saw that my attitude was really like, before it was, the expression on my face was always trying to make the peace, as you said, and I was just like, I'm done. I knew that this was the last time I was going to see the family. I just was finished. And so he had lost something very special to himself. And I didn't appreciate the fact that he had bought something special for himself, because he would use all of our money for our bills, for things, gifts for himself. And this particular ring was something he lost, and then he blamed me because I didn't like the ring. So we were driving home from his sister's house, and the advice she gave me before we left her house was that if I was scared, I need to run. I couldn't leave him there because they're like, no, he's too much. You can't keep him here at this house. So I was driving home and he was drunk and he was in the passenger seat and I was driving, and we got onto the highway and he's yelling and yelling and yelling and yelling at me and saying, and hitting the dashboard and cussing me out and just saying, how much he hates me and how I've just caused so many problems in his life, and just went on and on and on. I don't even remember all of the things, but then I heard his sister and I kept telling him, you need to stop or I'm going to crash, because I can't drive if you're just yelling at me, right? So I'm driving, just shaking driving, and I'm on the highway in Chicago on the tollway, and I pull over. Why? I was scared and I wanted to run because I was really thought I was going to crash the car if I didn't get out of driving. So I pulled over on the shoulder and I got out and I started to run on like an 8-lane highway. Like, where am I going to go, really? But I thought maybe someone would see me. I don't know what, you're not really thinking fully. You just want to get away, right? And then I decided that if I didn't straddle the guardrail, he was either going to throw me into traffic and I'd get hit by a truck, or he'd throw me down where the grass was, where the ditch was, and no one would be able to find me. So either way, I was like, somehow, miraculously, I straddled the fence, the guardrail, which stops trucks, by the way. That metal is really strong. And he caught me and he started to strangle me. And he was bashing my body against the side rail. And then he threw me down. Oh, but before that, I prayed and I said, help me. God, help me. I couldn't even speak. And he threw me down and he said, now, bitch, get up and drive me home. And I don't know how, but I got back in the car and I drove home, and I had my cell phone on my leg and I dialed 911, but I knew not to speak. But I didn't even know what was going to happen if I called 911, really, because I'm on a cell phone. I'm in the car on the highway. Like, there's nothing I can do. So, and he looked at me and I looked at him, and I thought now it was time for the apology, because that was the habit. He would just cuss me out and then he would apologize, and I was ready, and he looked at me and we were close. We were in the car, so he was here and I was here. And he literally said, I hate you, right? I will kill you. I'm going to chop you up into a million pieces, and you'll never know when it's going to happen, but it will, I promise. And I said, what about our kids? And he said, they're going to help. And I guess the police heard everything, because when I arrived at home, the police were there. They waited until I arrived and they saw him and he was fine. He said, we got to call a 911 call on the highway. And I thought to myself, if you leave and leave me here, he's going to kill me for calling 911. Why would you say that? And I actually signed, I use American Sign Language. I looked at the police and I signed, help me. And I put it on my mouth just like that. And they looked at me, and one police took my ex-husband away and one police came to me, and they saw the marks. They saw the bruises on my body from the guardrail, from him bashing me. And that was the last time I saw him until we went to court. My daughter had to drive me to the hospital. My other 3 children were upstairs. I didn't realize until later in life that they were looking out the window and they saw their dad being wrestled to the ground with the police. I mean, that's traumatic. It was a lot. They were young. They were like 16, 15, 12, and 7. So they were really young. And went to the hospital, and I didn't want to press charges for him, like attempted, to kill me. I didn't do that because I just wanted to get back to my babies at home. But my daughter, who's my oldest, was like, you have to get some protection. She was really an advocate for me, but I didn't want the kids to blame me, of course, that I, interrupted the family. But the kids thought it was not a healthy environment themselves. So I wasn't doing them any favor by staying, but you just can't see clearly at that time. And that was the last time until I went to his sentencing in court that I saw him. And then that was very powerful.
So in that situation, what is really cool is that your children saw something that you were not able to see and helped. And I want people to hear this because this is important. If you see something, don't be afraid to speak up, even if the person doesn't always receive what you're saying. Be there for them, continue to support them in any way you can, but also speak up because eventually it does have an impact, and that person knows that they have the support outside of that arrangement so that they can feel safe and have a place to go. Even if it's not a physical place to live, they know they have space, that people will be there for them if they leave a dangerous situation.
Yes.
It is probably one of the hardest things, really.
Yes, my kids are my strength, and I would never have been able to survive what we survived without them. And it was interesting because the next day was another story, really, because then what do? Right? He's been arrested. We have this home together. You know, what do you do next? I didn't have any experience about the next part, right? Okay, now the police are, but I'm thinking, well, he'll be back. So I have a really dear friend. Her name was Wendy, and she came and she helped, and she was a family friend. She's like family, like a sister from. And we went to the court, and we had to sit all day. And I had my two oldest kids with me. They went with me to court to help me make decisions, even though they were 16 and 15. That's a lot of responsibility and pressure on my kids. But again, they were like adults, right? They saw a lot. They had to make good, clear decisions as young children to keep safe.
Mm-hmm.
So I just followed their lead, and we got an order of protection, and it was supposed to last for 2 weeks, because many times people change their mind. So after 2 weeks, you come back to court again, and you have to decide if you want 2 years or if you want to just drop it. And most of the time, families, they fix things, they kiss and make up, and it's all good. But no, and within the 2 weeks, what happened was I was able to move my house, my kids and everything, like in 1 or 2 days. We found a new house. We packed up everything in garbage bags. I mean, we didn't have time to like really pack. It was a hurry. Everyone that loved and knew us came to help and support and helped us move. We found a new safe house, and not safe like as in a shelter, but we felt safe in this neighborhood with the people in the neighborhood, and it was at a different area. And then 2 weeks later, I went back and I got the 2 years continuance order of protection because he was not going to hurt me or the kids anymore. It was just over. So
it takes a lot of strength and courage. And before you had gotten out of this relationship, you had already started interpreting. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I was like a baby interpreter at that time.
Right. So what led you to interpreting, and how was that in a way something that saved you or gave you purpose?
Wow. Well, I became an interpreter because I thought it was going to be an easy job. I'll just be honest. I knew a lot of sign language. I grew up, I learned a lot. I knew a lot. I thought, oh, this would be an easy profession. I was very wrong. It's not easy. Don't, just because you could sign doesn't mean you could interpret. Just letting the audience know that. But I'm just being honest here. But I always had a passion for sign ever since I was a kid, 10 years old, growing up my whole life. And I decided I wanted to go back to school. When my kids were small, I would go with them to school. I would teach sign class. We would have like a choir of kids that could sign. It was so cute. And I followed my kids from preschool to elementary school and then to middle school. They're like, Mom, can you stop following us to school? Until they went to high school. And then I was like, oh, okay. But I went back to become an interpreter because we were also very, 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 very poor. I was not allowed to work. He would work sometimes. He would work. We had, government housing. We were on food stamps. We were really suffering because of his bad habits and his iffy work ethic, right? So I decided I became very ill in 2001 2 and 3. And I decided when I got better, I was going to go back and change my life because I was not going to live like this going anymore. So I went back to school to become an interpreter because it was local, close, and he saw the benefits of me going back to school because I got a lot of free money. So that helped him not have to work because of the money I was getting from the college to go back to school. So it was, it was okay because he was getting something from that.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to go back to school, but he kept saying, if you go out into the field, you're going to realize that there's a better life, and trying to guilt me and, oh, I'm not going to do that. You're going to go back to your mom and dad. I'm not going to do that. Yeah, well, he was right across the board, So I went back to school, and when I became an interpreter, it's just so interesting because when I moved to Florida, which was in 2014. So from 2008 to 14, I stayed in Illinois where he was. So there was opportunities. He could have found us. Anything could happen, but he didn't. He didn't come looking for us. He didn't do any of that. But when I moved to Florida, I was able to help a deaf woman who was also a victim of domestic violence and a partner against her will. And I was able to remove her from a situation and go to the court and navigate the system and understand what to do to keep her safe. And that moment, I was like, I get it. What happened to me was not for me, but to help other people behind me. So that way I was able to get her out and keep her safe. And that's when I realized it was all for, this purpose. My ability to sign, my domestic violence experience, to now being able to be, a person that's safe for somebody else.
So, for people who are deaf and have a problem communicating, because let's face it, I don't understand sign language. So, if someone was trying to communicate with me and they couldn't speak, I can understand where that would be very difficult for them to get out of a situation that's already really hard to get out of. So you could be trapped in that situation easily. And now you found yourself in a unique space to be able to assist between someone who might be trapped in that situation and help them navigate.
Yeah, there was something really amazing about that. Like I just, when things are too heavy for me, I've always thought about it's not for me. It's for my experience for somebody else. I thought it was for my children. I didn't know who, but it was this one woman, and I'm sure others, because I've had the opportunity to talk. This is my third opportunity to talk about my story. And the first time was actually at the Hearing Society in Chicago, and I signed my entire speech. So the second time was from a shelter that helped me through the learning. And I really want to talk about that because these shelters for women and men of domestic violence are amazing. And those staff are great. So I was a guest speaker for their keynote for their fundraiser, their annual fundraiser. Mm-hmm. And we collected $250,000 in about 15-minute talk. So that was awesome. And the most special part of that night, it was that my daughter had the ability to introduce me. And so she got to say, my mom, blah, 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 blah. And, it's not just about me because we're a unit. It affected all of us. It was just not me, because he was abusive to the children first. And I couldn't do it. I used to try, even when he'd spank them when they were little, I would say, I don't agree with that. I don't want to spank the kids. And he's like, if you don't shut up, I'm going to, whoop you to me, things like that he would say. And I was like, well, then do it. And he would stop hitting them, not hit me. But like, that didn't feel really good. But going back to the shelter, I didn't have to stay at the shelter because I did find a new house to move to, which I was so thankful. But I knew that I needed to have some help for the family and understanding what to do. But the kids were like, they did not want to go to counseling. They didn't want therapy. They just were like, had nothing, did not want anything to do with it. But I went, and actually they helped me really realize the cycle of domestic violence and how real it was. And they gave me like a checklist of things. And if I saw something that applied to me, I have to check it. I checked and checked and checked all of these pages. And I thought, do you know my husband? You wrote this about, like, I just couldn't believe that he was on paper.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then it was really interesting because as you went forward and learned more, they would have you check again the same. And I saw that it was less and less and less and less. The feelings were less. And I was really proud to be able to see that. So that helped me realize a lot. And they were wonderful. They helped me get divorced. They helped me file. They helped me. I mean, my ex-husband didn't even know we were getting a divorce because he was in jail, and they served him the papers to our last known address where we lived together. So he didn't get those papers. So
So that's something too. The shelters, they don't just provide a place to live. They
right,
have legal aid and they have counseling at those places that help. And I know for me, getting the protective order, they did that. And they also did the same thing. They make you go through and check all these things to see where you were being abused or where abusive behavior came in. And you don't realize how much of it was going on until you start putting it down on paper. You don't realize it.
right.
And I'm telling you, I think I had 18 pages of check marks and narrative stories that they made you go back and remember incidents. And I was surprised. I really was surprised.
Yeah. I was really surprised also, but it was so healthy for me to see that I was not alone. And that if they had this wheel and they had these papers and they had this checklist, that means that there are people were, before me that have gone through this. But the laughter part, I don't want it to be so sad. And, I'm really honestly, I know this is going to sound wild, but I'm honestly happy he tried to kill me that night. And I know that seems a little odd, but if he didn't try to kill me that night, I would have continued to make excuses for his bad behavior indefinitely. Like, oh, he didn't mean that, or oh, it'll be fine, or, so I have to own what did I do? So I had to do a lot of self evaluation of myself to find out how did I get here? And how will I never get here again? But, I put the walls up, trust no one, and just focus on the kids.
Well, so let's talk a second too about cycles because you broke a cycle by standing up and leaving. And you also started to see that maybe sometimes the way we allow our kids to respond to people in authority can be somewhat of a grooming, and they might start accepting behavior that they shouldn't accept. And I think the help that your kids gave you allows them to break a cycle and maybe not fall into those same behavior patterns or accepting that type. They might see the red flags. Do you agree?
Yes, I do. I do agree. I do agree. And the one thing that because, children do what they see, right? And you are modeling something. But I did notice that my loyalty to my ex-husband for 17 years was not just the best example, honestly, because you don't want to be loyal to a mess. And it's really hard to go because of the roles. And I wish if I could have do one thing different, although I don't really want to change anything, because if you change one thing, your entire life would be different. But if I knew what I knew now, what I should have known then, we hear, I feel like I've become my mother by saying that, but I just wish I would have shown that you don't have to, you're not loyal if you leave, right? It's not about being loyal. It's about being safe and smart and modeling what to accept and not. And I think that all of my children have had situations where they did accept bad behavior from either a friend or a partner or boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever, but they also realize when it feels wrong, it's wrong. And if mom can leave and start life again, I can also. And I see now that my adult children, they're adults, they are making, good decisions, and they're finding the people that mean them for good. And that's wonderful. But, we all have our own trauma still, but we laugh a lot often. And it's brought me, to a place that I could never have imagined, and I never would have been allowed to arrive to my best potential if I was still in that marriage.
And loyal first should come to yourself and your spiritual relationship. That's where your loyalties exist. I couldn't think of the word. That's where they exist first. And secondly, it's anything external. And so that should, be something that the kids have learned from this too. It's something that they're going to have and take with them. So when they find themselves in a place where they see bad behavior, or maybe they've accepted bad behavior for a little while, and they change that or they draw that boundary, they are being loyal to themselves.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. Yeah,
So,
it's really hard to be loyal to yourself, but it's such an important skill to have. Yeah, but now I'm a different person. I'm back to that Beth before marriage. I'm back, but like 2.0, right? 2.0 or 5.0. I don't know. I'm on steroids or something. I'm like nuts. But I just feel so blessed for the life that I have and the opportunities I had. But I didn't just sit there and dwell in my circumstance either, and I really don't want to have people feel sorry for me or anything like that. It's just like, but if I could be a light to show that life after this horrible situation can be so positive. I have a dear friend, he's probably on this call, Peter Sobey, if you're on here, hi. Thank you for introducing me to Deanna. We have our mutual friend. But he told me when I told him my story years ago that this should be a lifetime story, not because of the trauma and the sadness, but because afterwards, the positivity and the things that have happened, all four of my kids are exceptional people. I mean, some kids would be like, sitting in the muck and not trying to improve their life or feeling sorry for themselves. But they're all professional. They're all amazing. I'm my own boss now. At one time, I told you I had food stamps and housing through the government. And now, I have my own business and I'm able to, fly to see whoever I want. Or it's funny because when we used to file our taxes at the end of every year, we would get a nice chunk back. So we had a lot of kids, so we would get money back and we were poor. To get $4,000 is a lot of money back then. Well, now if you see $4,000 in a month, it's like almost, it's just so interesting, right? Like it's just being evolving into the person that you were supposed to become one day, and knowing, my son, my youngest son told me, Mom, you're a superhero. Recently he said that to me. He's 21. I mean, he's not like this kid. When he said that to me, we were talking about our story because he really wanted to know the details. And I said, no, I'm not a superhero. I don't want any glory about this situation. It's not about that. He said, no, but that night I didn't bring my kids with us to go out for fun when I graduated from my program, right? Because I knew that every time we went, something bad happened. And so I kept them at home, and maybe they were thinking we were just ignoring them, but I was really protecting them. And when I was telling my son the story, I didn't recognize it still. He said, you kept us at home to protect us. And that's what superheroes do. They protect people. And that just was like, wow, and then you have to put on your cape of courage every single day and try your best and admit when you're wrong. And I think it's really important to have open dialogue with your family, your children especially, instead of sugarcoating it and say, oh, this or that. I mean, I didn't say, oh, your dad tried to kill me. It wasn't like, that blunt. The two older ones knew, but like my little one who was 7, he didn't know that. And it was interesting because we had a counselor that would come every Friday for free to come and talk about the trauma. And that's really important to have a therapist, right, to talk to. Nothing wrong with that. But on a Friday afternoon, if your kids are 8, 16, 15, 13, they don't want to sit and talk to a therapist on a Friday afternoon. They want to go out with their friends or be on their bikes or do fun things. And every Friday, it would just mess up our entire weekend because they were tired of talking again and again and again and again and again for almost 2 years, until one day our therapist actually quit. She said, I'm finished. You all don't want to heal. You don't want to use the skills. I've been coming. I'm done. And that day is when I saw the shift happen. And we all started to pick up all the skills and we stopped talking about it. We just started to live again. And that was when I saw the change.
Yeah, and that's important because you don't need to relive. Talk therapy is not always the best when you've dealt with trauma. Sometimes it is giving you tactical things to do or physical things to do to tap into something external because you've been trapped for so long. And I love the fact that when she left was the time you guys were able to start implementing things and truly start your healing. You could work as a team.
Right. I mean, it wasn't without a glitch, it wasn't a smooth thing. I had teenagers, okay? So I had 3 in high school at one time. That was trauma enough. But I did start to see the change, and it was really interesting. And another thing also I really want to illustrate today is the importance of self-advocacy through all of this. You are stronger than you think. You can do more than you think, and I would go when we had the order of protection, it was a no contact order. Doesn't mean if it's nice and sweet and you're sorry, it's okay. It's still no contact, period. So I would get a text, I'm sorry. I would get a letter, or before we did the move, like within those first few days, a letter from, the county jail saying, I'm sorry, I love you. I was wrong, blah, blah, blah. But I would go to the police department, Deanna, and I would show them the text or show them. And they literally well, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not threatening that he's saying he's sorry and he loves you. There's nothing wrong with that. And I said, no contact means no contact, not if it's positive or negative, period. These police did not care. I mean, that's how people die because
And
police don't take it serious.
technically it's illegal. So I think some laws have improved since then because of the contact and people who have died because of contact. That some detailed attention is given to this, but it's still not as good as it should be. It definitely isn't. So fend for yourself, speak up for yourself. Also know that we, like you said, are stronger than we think. We're magic, if you think about it, right? We have everything inside of us that we need to heal and to advocate for ourselves. We know ourselves and what we're dealing with better than anyone. Have confidence in that and believe yourself. And I think that's part of the problem sometimes in these situations is you begin to question yourself and you begin to doubt yourself. So look at this and say to yourself, if you know anybody or if you've been in this situation, to share these stories with them and let people know that they're not alone. And that's kind of why I do this. It's to create community and connection and to say, hey, if I can do it, if Beth can do it, then you can too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it doesn't only happen, to women, and I think that's really important. It's happening to children, it's happening to men. It happens, and for us to deny people of their experiences is wrong. And it's also interesting because going back to the deaf woman I helped when I first moved to Florida, I was a director of deaf service program. Like I had an executive job. I was not looked at as someone who was a domestic violence survivor. Like, what does that look like? That's the other point, right? Like, you could be professional and you could be all made up and looking great, but you don't know what other people are experiencing at home. And that's why I think it's really important to be kind to people because you just don't know what they're experiencing. And, I lost a lot of friends through my journey, and I've lost a lot of Um, Whatever I lost, it doesn't matter because I got it back now, and I have lots of friends and family and good relationships with people. I'm still single because I'm not really that trustworthy at this point right yet. I'm trying. I'm trying, but that's another show, really for another time. Like, how do you trust again after the trauma? I'm happy that I could laugh, but trust is a big thing, and knowing that I don't want to lose myself again ever.
And that brings up another point, which is trauma recovery and trauma healing is an ongoing process. It's not something that you're done or you're ever over it. It is a process that continues, but even though it continues and healing continues, you can find laughter. And find those moments when you find yourself coming out of a situation. Take note of the first time something made you happy, something made you laugh, like you hadn't been able to in a long time. Is there a time you remember, like all after you came through this, was there a moment in time where you laughed and said, wow, I haven't laughed like that in a long time?
That's a really good question. It just brings me back to my family time with the kids because, and I think it was a lot of responsibility for my youngest son because he was 7 and 8 and 9 years old, so he was like the peacemaker and he was the silly one. He always tried to make us laugh, all of us. And it was something that he did that we all just stopped and looked at and just started to laugh and realize that we're okay. We're safe. I don't remember exactly what the situation was, but I remember it happening. And it's all kind of like, I think we were all like angry about something. And like my youngest son would do something silly and we would just stop and realize, oh, we don't need to live like this still.
Right.
Like
You,
we're so used to this, feeling. And then we would just start to laugh again and again. And now, I mean, all we do is laugh together. And I've always laughed through my hard times anyway. Like maybe it's a nervous laugh. I don't know what it is, but it's like, I really try to see things half full. It's really hard to sign and talk at the same time. I'm sorry for my deaf friends that are watching. I'm like killing this. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. But it's just so important to be able to laugh at yourself almost, not
mhm.
like in a sarcastic way, but like, am I really, you know, doing this or achieving this? And I think that when we achieve things, we laugh more often now also. Like, who would have thought this would happen and laugh because we all have a good life now. So not saying it was a bad life then. It was just a hard life then.
So, and you have to think then when you are able to come through these situations, um, you learn to not take everything so seriously, right? You start to go, okay, not everything is as bad as we make it out to be in our head. And we know this because we've had things that were actually really bad. And so now we understand the value of what we have and the peace that we have now. And even when things are high energy or intense, you find laughter.
Yeah, and I think I laughed the most about watching everybody else freak out about things. And I'm not laughing at them. I'm not laughing at them. But you have to say to them, look, you're going to be okay. I know you can't see it right now, but you will. And you will
Right.
be okay. And it's not that serious. And I had a quote on my refrigerator growing up that said, this too will pass. And that was just really, it hit me through my years of this will be okay at some point. You don't know how. And honestly, and this also goes back to for the 17 years or at least 16 years of my marriage. Towards the end, I started to just pray to change my situation at home. Like wasn't specific about my prayer. I wasn't like, oh, let him die, or or I'm going to get divorced, or nothing specific on how to fix it, but just fix my situation at home. And it was that night that it got so ugly and so terrible that my situation started to get fixed at home. And so it's hard. And also the other hard part too is that with the protective order, um, the extended family now can't have contact with us either. So now you're not just losing, the dad, the mom, the four kids unit. You're losing an entire side of your family that we were with all the time because we were allowed to be with that family. That was
Right.
controllable. He knew who we were talking to. He knew, so that was a controlled thing. But now they're all gone. Also, cousins for my kids, uncles and aunts and grandmothers and what do you do? Because they would all try to, guilt me and say, "Oh, what did you do? You took the kids from him, or he went to jail because of you." And that guilt, that was part of the order. And another really important part of that to people need to know is that I didn't put him in jail, right? He put himself in jail. I didn't take his kids from him. He lost his kids because of his behavior. So when people say, "Oh, you can't do that to him," or "You can't report him because you're going to destroy his life," I'm not destroying his life. He destroyed his own life. And we have to be accountable for our own actions and our own behavior. What did I do through the years? Was I perfect? No. But what was my role is I accepted the bad behavior again and again and again and again. And that became what we did. He got upset, he yelled, I cried, I tried to cut myself with rocks or with whatever I could to stop the attention. So I would prefer just wanted to die if he was going to continue to just, yell at me all the time or what have you. Make it stop. You're so desperate, desperate to make it stop. But at the end of the day, it's not what you've done to the person that is abusing you. It's their behavior that gets them into a situation that they have to, the end result is on them. It's not on you. And it was interesting. I know our time is almost up, but when I was in the court, I got to tell the judge, you know, everything. I'm going to chop you up to little pieces, blah, blah. I told him the whole thing that I've just shared with you, and the court was like, silent because they couldn't believe I was saying, they thought I was threatening the judge by his words. I said, the honorable judge of blah. And he actually said that he was going to give my ex-husband a rope. He's either going to climb it up or he's going to hang himself with it. What does that mean? He said, you need to go to a psych evaluation. You need to come back in 1 month. You need to have a list of things he had to do. And if you don't come back, there is a cell waiting for you, and it won't have anything to do with Beth, right?
Right.
So 1 month later, he was out for a month, which I was scared to death. He was out. He went back and stayed for a couple of years because he didn't do what the court ordered. So again, it was his behavior that got him in there. It wasn't me, and it wasn't the judge. So
And they know, the judges, the law enforcement, the people who work in this, the people at the shelters, they know the MO and the way, I guess the MO might be hard, but they know the way that they operate. And so with that, the judge knew when he gave them those orders that probably 9 times out of 10, they're going to hang themselves, right? Theoretically. Right. Not for real. But he didn't follow through. They're not going to follow through because they don't believe they need the help or they aren't the ones that need to change. And so then you pay that price too. So,
yeah, and it was interesting because the therapist did say something that we'll always remember. She would say, as many years as he's been living in this type of cycle, either with himself or whatever, is going to be that many years until he would be well and healed if he did the work every day, all day. So he was what, like 50 something years old. So she said it will take a good 50 years for him to change his behavior if he worked on it every day for 50 years. And that was really impactful for me. I'm like, I don't have another 50 years waiting for this change. So, yeah. But
no.
I really, really appreciate the opportunity to talk with all of you and share my story. And don't be ashamed. It's very hard to admit when you're in a situation, but when you break free and you laugh again, it's very empowering.
It is. And I don't know if you're okay with having questions. I would like to allow anyone in the audience that might want to come up, say hi, if you have a question or a comment, to feel free to join the show with us and give Beth more work for signing.
That's all right. That's all right. I
So
appreciate
if
my interpreter friends.
oh my goodness. And just to know that we have some comments in the chat. Peter, he commented saying hi to us, and he said he's so blown away by your story and you, Beth. So some proud friends here in the audience. So if you guys want to come up, just go ahead and hit the plus sign. And while I am waiting to see if anybody wants to come up, Beth, I want to ask you my last question that I'll ask all my guests. And that is, give us one, two things that you would like us to walk away from this with and remember. Something that, a nugget, something we can use, or something that just was meaningful to you through your experience.
Yeah. So the one thing I think is really important and helpful for me, and hopefully for other people, is that you should write. Right? It's your safe place, and you can write what you're going through. And the reason why I encourage people to write, even if it's just one word, I feel shitty. Fuck this. Whatever it is, right? Write it, date it, and don't read it again until 6 months later, but write. And I realized that when I read it again, I look back, I was like, I'm not there. I'm not in this place still. I'm in this place. And I'm in this place. So to watch it evolve has been really, really cool. I'm writing my memoirs about that. I'm not going to tell you the name of the title because it's not registered yet, but one day I'll get back to that. I think that's important. And also, again, you're stronger than you think, and that you have to use your instincts. If it feels wrong, it's wrong. And you can find a safe place.
I
I
love
see Peter
that.
wants to say something. What are you going to say, Peter?
Yeah, Peter jumped up, so I'm excited to hear what Peter has to say. Hey, Peter, do you want to come on
Hi,
camera?
sure.
Okay. Hey, hey.
Hello, Beth and Deanna.
Uh,
I just couldn't resist coming on and saying hello to two incredible women. And I'm just getting to know you, Deanna, but I've known Beth since I was 20 years old, I believe.
Yep.
And she's been a very important person in my life throughout all these years. And I know, Beth, that you've shared these stories with me before, but you know me and my memory. I feel like I'm hearing them for the first time again tonight. And just the strength that you had to endure through that and to get yourself out of that situation, and the strength your children had, which they got from you. They were young, but they got that strength from you. And to see where your four children are now today, they are all thriving amazingly in life. I can't say enough of the respect, the admiration, and of course, the love I have for you, Beth. So thank you for coming on here and being so open and sharing your story with us all.
Thank you so much, Peter. I have no words. I love you so much. I appreciate that. Hey, and kids, if you're watching, that's Peter.
I love it. There's a backstory. We won't get into that. But I am blessed to have met Peter here and interviewed Peter, and then was able to get the connection to Beth through Peter. And honestly, it took us a little while to connect and actually get in touch with each other. And I think that, again, that timing was so perfect. It worked out that it fell that we were able to connect and interview during this month, which is a good month for us to tell these stories and to raise awareness in this arena. But also, we spent, I don't know, 2 hours on the phone chatting last week. And we just have so much in common as far as stories and passion and mission. And I just think, what a great connection. So thanks, Peter.
Yes, I'm so happy that both of you have met each other.
You know,
So-
we look to community. So I appreciate you, Deanna, and thank you for giving me this platform to be able to share. And I hope we could do it again and talk more. But purple, wear your purple for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and just offer a listening heart without judgment. That's the other part I really want to share with you. And be persistent. If the police are telling you it's not important, go every single day like I did until they finally realize it's important.
Yeah. And stick to those orders too, because it makes a difference legally with the ground that you have to stand on. If you don't stick to your order, they think that you're not taking it seriously. So it doesn't matter what the police say, just stick to it. But I want to thank you, Beth, for coming on the show and sharing your story. I appreciate you so much. I see you and you're beautiful.
I see you
And-
and you're beautiful also.
Yeah. And I just want to thank everybody here in the audience who stuck with us for the show. Chris, Peter, Joanne, Michelle, Lois, or Lois. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Deborah, Julie, Susan, and Deb, Katie, and Child of God. So I just want everyone to know that I appreciate you being here. Anybody who's listening on the web, thanks for being here. If you're watching the replay, thanks for being here. We really appreciate it. Come back and see us. And we're here every Tuesday. I'm here every Tuesday with stories. So until next time, I want to tell everybody that I see you. You're beautiful. Take care of each other. Stay connected. Until next time, shine on. I'm going to bring the weights up. Thanks, guys.